Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Now, in this video, we are talking about types of data. So in the previous video, we talked about introducing the idea of surveying and sampling, taking smaller parts of the population, collecting data and applying it to the population as a whole. We also talked about some of the concerns and implications of this when it's done wrong and when there's certain things that lead to bias in the surveys that we carry out. Now in this video, we are going to introduce the types of data. Now we've talked about this before on this channel, but this should serve as a little bit of a recap for some of you. And in doing so, I'll hopefully be able to give you some good ways of remembering these so that when it comes to doing this in your exam, you can have a nice little bank of strategies to remember the different types, because there are quite a few different types of data we can collect. Now, surveys, we said, can be used to collect data, and the statistical data can be divided into subgroups. So we're going to create a little flow chart here, and starting with the actual data we're collecting up the top, the two main branches these fall under are categorical and numerical. Now, the meaning of these is sort of in the name and what some of these words sound like. If we look at categorical, what does that sound like? Well, that sounds like categories. So data that's organized in different types of categories. And numerical, what does that sound like? Or numeracy or number. So we are dealing with data with numbers associated. So a good way to remember these two is, first of all, it's just in the name, but if your data has numbers, it is numerical. If it doesn't, it is most likely going to be categorical. Now, from these two branches, we can break off into another two, because in categorical data, there are two types of data from there. So one of these is called nominal, and nominal data, this involves categories with no order. So here, our categories have no order. For example, colors. Colors don't really have an order. If you're surveying for the eye color of a particular group, this is going to be a nominal type of data, of categorical data. The second one here is going to be what we call ordinal. Now, if you want to remember ordinal, let's look at the word. Ordinal sounds similar to order. So there is an order to these types of data. So we have order here. So our categories are ordered in some way. For example, if we look at a scale from low, medium, high. This is an example of ordinal data. Think about when you fill out these little survey forms when you leave a store. They have like, outstanding, good, bad. There is a type of order to this data. Now, there are still categories associated, there are no numbers associated, but there is an order to this. Now, for our numerical data, I will actually, because there's a little bit more writing, I will bring this down here. And I'll break numerical into a couple of different categories. But our numerical data, it deals with numbers. So there are two types of numbers that we can deal with numerical data. One of these is called discrete. And what discrete is that the data can only take on only a limited number of values. Can only take on a limited number of values. Okay, what we mean by this is just numbers, so sort of just stationary numbers. So our counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So an example of discrete data will be interviewing people about, for example, the number of children in a family. Or number of cars owned in a household, etc. So the numbers we are using with discrete data are just our counting numbers. And our answers are going to just give us something. They're going to prompt these types of answers. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So something like number of children in a family, number of cars owned by a family. So this is our first little subcategory of discrete numerical data, and the other here is continuous. Now, continuous data can take on a given range of number values. So anything that we can, anything that we can measure on some kind of spectrum. So things like height, weight, time taken to, like, I don't know, complete a race or something like that. Anything where we measure it on some kind of number line spectrum where we can have these little in-between numbers as well. So height can take on a really massive range of values. And it's not only just counting numbers. We can have, 177.6 centimeters or 184.9 centimeters. Same with weight and time taken as well. It's anything with some kind of unit that exists on a type of spectrum. And this is very different to what we talk about with discrete, which is kind of just counting numbers. So we now have a nice little flow chart. Now, I didn't have enough room, but we can sort of break this down into these types of subcategories. So I have categorical data, things in categories. We have nominal with no order, or ordinal with some kind of order. And we have numerical data, which is to do with numbers. So either just counting numbers or a spectrum of numbers in a given range, like in continuous. So what we're going to do is we're going to describe types of data based on what we've just learned. So for example, just 2 questions here. We want to see what type of data the following survey questions would generate. So one of these is, how many TVs do you have in your home? Okay, so when we do these types of questions, we want to first break it up into one of the 2 big branches, which is numerical or categorical. So the very first thing we ask ourselves with a question like this, to try to narrow this down, in our heads we're going to say, are there numbers involved? If there are, we automatically know it's numerical data. If they're not, it's going to be categorical. So this is asking about some type of quantity. How many TVs do you have in your home? So immediately that bit there tells us that we are looking for some type of numerical data. So we've narrowed it down to numerical data. Now we just want to decide, is the numerical data discrete or continuous? Now, here, if we look, discrete sums up this question quite well. It's only taking a limited number of values. So it's going to be some kind of number of items, one of the counting numbers. For example, number of children in a family, number of cars owned, number of TVs owned. So here, we're not looking at some wide spectrum like in continuous data. So this is going to be numerical and discrete. So when we describe this type of data, we have first the first type of data. Are there numbers involved? Are there not? And when we decide there are numbers involved, what type of numbers are involved? That's the next bit. Okay, let's do one more question. So in question 2, what type of music do you listen to? Okay, so we're just asking what type of music do you listen to? So once again, we're going to ask ourselves, are there numbers involved? This can immediately narrow it down to either categorical or numerical. Now, this is talking about types of music. Numbers are not mentioned at all. So we can immediately say, okay, this is categorical. And we have categories of music. So we can narrow this down slightly. And then we need to consider the answer you would give. So an answer you would give is, I don't know, maybe classical, rock, hip hop, etc. Now, do these have any order to them? The answers we give, is there some type of order from good to bad or high to low? There kind of isn't. It's just random categories given as an answer which have no order. So if we go back up to our little flow chart, the ones that have no order, remember a good way to remember this is ordinal sounds like order. But our thing here has no order, so it's going to be nominal. So down the bottom here, the type of music that you listen to, this would be categorical and nominal. But this is how we can break down all of the different types of data we're going to encounter, as well as how to answer some questions in which we are writing what types of data would be collected when doing these types of surveys. So that brings us to the end of the video today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.